Hello everyone, welcome to another live while I set the stage. Let me come back in. Come on. Oh, I gotta lower everybody. Shoo. If it's your first time here, hi, I'm Alicia, one of the master trainers on the app. And today we are covering safe practices for bendy bodies. That is the topic today, au du jour. And we also are running our competition. So if you want the details on that, you can head over to Stretchit's bio and find a link there with details. And also, I'm another Alicia. We're also starting our middle split challenge on Monday. So if you want to participate in that, again, all details will be linked in bio. But today we're covering the topic of safe practices for bendy bodies. And I think the first thing to realize or to know is if you have a bendy body. And what that means are people who are ultra flexible just from their genetics. Like they could do the thumb to wrist thing. They could do all these super high range of motion movements with their joints, but they might be lacking control and strength. So they could get into that end range, but they don't have much control and they're trying to acquire it. So that's what we're going over today. We're basically going over how can you be strong in your flexible body. And I'll just suggest different techniques that you can use, and you could also use the opportunity, since you are on the live, where if you have a specific question about your own flexible body, meaning you have had issues in acquiring strength in certain range of motions, in certain positions, don't mind me as I'm trying to get the mic closer. Okay. And this live hopefully will provide a little clarity in helping you get stronger in that range of motion. And what does that mean exactly? So as an example, a split, right? So if someone does a front split, one leg forward and one leg back, markers of being flexible but not having great control is that you can't take your hands off the floor and hold the split on just your legs alone, that you're wobbly, you're not stable in the position, and you're not able to exit out of it the same way you entered. So if you could slide forward into a split, you should be able to slide back out of it. So that is an indication that you have control and strength in that end range of motion. Another example is a deep squat. So you might have the range of motion to get in, but if you don't have the strength to get back up, meaning you're stuck in that end range, might be an indication that you have to work on improving your strength in that particular position. And the last suggestion or the last example I will describe is a bridge. That's the back bend where feet and hands are on the floor and you're in an extended position in your spine and your hips. If you're able to get into that, but you can't actually, well, I would argue you might have trouble entering it from the standing position. So you might not be able to waterfall into the back bend. You'll have to get into it from the floor. And once you're in the back bend, you'll have to lie all the way down to get out and you won't be able to stand back up. So that's also an indication that you're super flexible without the strength. Now, the first stage is to start introducing strength through isometrics. So first identify that range of motion that you would like to get stronger in. So for instance, if you're looking to get stronger in your hip extension, and you could start in this 90-90 position, as I love to do. So you have one knee forward and one knee back, and you press that hip forward. So you want to now build that tension in your hip extension as if you're trying to slide your knee forward, but it stays in place. You tense your entire body, and in that extension position, you're trying to contract the lengthened part of the stretch. That's the first part of your pails and rails. And the second part, your rails, the regressive side, that's the shortened side. So you are now looking to target the lengthened side, isometrically contract the lengthened portion of the stretch. And after you ramp up to a high effort, the highest effort you can get to, maybe if it's your first time doing this exercise, you might be able to ramp up to maybe 60% of your 1 rep max, or your max effort, I should say. So once you meet that, you hold it for 10 to 15 seconds, and then you try to ramp up the effort on the shortened side. You try to get to where you can hold it for 10 to 15 seconds and no more, release, and then you'll find not only do you have more range of motion, but now you're starting to build that intelligence in the tissues, where not only will they be able to recognize that range, but now also recognizing that they have strength and control in that range. And again, the first part of it is to start introducing the isometrics. Isometrics are probably one of the safest, not 100% safe because everything has risk, but one of the safest ways to start introducing strength training in your flexibility training, especially for someone who has little stability in the body, who has all the range of motion but very little control. Because, for instance, I wouldn't start introducing dumbbells or free weights until they have control over their own body. Once they've established that, then you can start ramping up the intensity by introducing dumbbells and other weight props to add load to the actual movement. Now, forward folding is another example where you might be able to get into a nice comfortable forward fold, and you could probably come back up easily as well. But if you want to start strengthening your hamstrings, then I would, yes, start thinking about introducing load in some way. So let's say you have a barbell or 2 dumbbells and you start curling down, and you want to use both your back and your hamstrings to come back up. Now, just because you could get down there with weight doesn't necessarily mean that you could return to your starting position in the same manner. So before you start doing that, one way to regress the exercise and just to kind of try it out before hurting yourself is you get into your forward fold, but you bend the knees to roll back up. So you find that hinge, you bend, and you come back up. Just to demonstrate this, I'm going to hold, I'm going to pretend these water bottles are dumbbells. I wish I was like in a space where I just had dumbbells and barbells at my disposal, but that's fine. We can improvise. So if these were 2 dumbbells, you hinge it down and you can roll back up. And eventually you'll be able to hinge and come up, and you'll feel what the hamstrings have to do in order to return to that starting position, right? But I would start introducing isometrics to your hamstrings by this exercise. I could split, but I have to warm up for it. I lifted yesterday, so I'm pretty tight, but I could show you by the end of the class. So one way to start introducing the isometrics to your hamstrings is to find yourself in a seated hamstring position and pushing the leg into the ground. Another way you can do this is standing, actually. This actually might be easier. Well, it depends. It will be easier if you had like 2 sticks either side of you and you try to drive your heel into the platform, and that's going to help contract the hamstrings, not only the lengthened part, the hamstrings, but then you're going to also work on the shortened portion of the exercise. So driving that leg down like you're trying to push it through the ground or push it through the platform is a great isometric exercise to start introducing those strength elements to your stretch. And you could also just hold the stretch to get acquainted with the actual position. And then you start pushing down into the platform. And once you establish that, then you can start increasing your range of motion and also start introducing other types of strength elements to your practice. Okay? Now, like we demonstrated before in our 90-90 position, ramp up to a tension that you could hold no more than 10 to 15 seconds. So you're driving that heel into the platform, and this is for the hamstrings. Once you've leveled up to an effort you can't sustain, you hold 10 to 15 seconds, and then as if you're trying to compress your torso even tighter to your thigh, now you're contracting and isometrically doing so. The shortened part of the stretch, ramp up to an effort, to a tension you can't hold more than 10 to 15 seconds, and then you stay for that amount of time, and then you melt into the stretch. I would say trying to generate your own effort, like your own body tension, can be tough if you haven't done that before. And that's why I think it's a great entry point for those super bendy bodies that are not yet familiar or acquainted with expressing that type of strength and control, right? It could be tough for someone to just squeeze because they don't have that experience. Their body doesn't have that experience and coordination yet. So that's why I think it's a great stage to begin with isometrics before you get into the more advanced practices that include external load. That's just my suggestion. Yes, isometric exercises helps to control our flexibility because flexibility is just range of motion. It doesn't actually speak to what that range of motion can do or express when generating tension from their end range. So, what does that mean? I'll do my low squat example again. So the ability to express depth, but now come out of that depth, is an example of mobility, right? I have the range of motion in my hips, knees, and ankles as well. Well, that's in reference to my joints, but in the tissues, the softer tissues, like the hamstrings and the quads and the glutes, I have now this control to go in and out of a pretty deep range of motion, but still be able to exit out of it. And that is the difference between flexibility and mobility. Flexibility is just the passive range of motion. Mobility is you being able to generate force in those ranges of motion. They're often conflated and they're often spoken in the same breath, but they are completely different. How do you get your butt to the ground when squatting with weights? The same way that you would squat without the weight. The thing is, you have to practice with a weight that allows you to still enter that low range, that deep range of motion, and get out of it. So what happens sometimes is that people want to get low, but they're still back here. And that's because you might not have enough ankle flexion to pitch your knees forward so that your butt can be forward and that your chest can be up. Because it's a lot easier and more efficient to go up and down with the knees going beyond your toe line, which they can in fact and are allowed to do so if trained properly. So you wouldn't ask your knees to push a barbell up if they're not even used to pushing your own body weight up. And that's how people get hurt, and that's why they say it's not supposed. This is what happens when your knees go past your toes. No, that's what happens when you do anything without the proper loading and dosing. You could get hurt in any capacity. But when introducing more ranges of motion and now also trying to perform these ranges with weight, probably a good idea that you master that range and that generating or expressing strength with your body weight and practicing that. And then you start to load it. Maybe you do the goblet squat style where you hold the dumbbell in front of your chest, right? And then you proceed to the heavier loads with the barbell, or you want to do the Smith machine, whatever you like. Whatever you like. And all isometrics can be done in any shape or form, right? So don't feel like isometrics could only be done in certain positions. No, if you're able, you're welcome. If you're able to generate tension in whatever position that you can comfortably be in, you can apply isometrics to that position. That's it. If you have the support as well, so make sure that you're able to generate enough force in that said position properly, because then if you're not able to, then you're going to just spin your wheels. Yes, so we spoke about this. Actually, we covered splits last week. So if you want to check out that live, I believe it will still be on our feed. You could check out my go-to stretches that I like to program that get me to my splits. Okay? Today we're talking about bendy bodies and the safe practices for bendy bodies. And again, safe practices just means practicing control over your bendy body. So not letting the range of motion completely take over, holding yourself back a bit, and now actually teaching your body how to control that. Okay. So another example too is wrists, right? So if you have super flexible wrists, probably a good idea that you start teaching them to express force in both flexion and extension. And not just that, but in the fist position too, palm position. And a lot of people feel pain in their push-ups because, well, for two reasons. Reason number one, that they don't have the flexibility to actually pitch the shoulder a little in front of the wrist. Not that you have to do a ton, but now generating force from this position can feel quite foreign for someone who can't even get there actively. So if you could barely lift your palm to 90 degrees, yeah, it's gonna hurt when you do push-ups because you can't even get into that range of motion on your own. And you have to rely on gravity in the position itself to flex your wrists in such a degree to do push-ups on. And your wrists are like, I'm not used to this, help. There you go, wrist issues emerge. Not saying that's the only reason, but that is one of the reasons why people go through that. And it's the other way as well, with the extension, or I should say in the extended position, that they don't have the range of motion, nor do they have the strength to do a push-up because their wrists are not used or conditioned for those forces. Again, another example for the splits. Now I have to, let me warm myself up because it's been a little bit. I did my splits yesterday after lifting, which if you lift, definitely try and remember to do your splits right after you lift, because your body is warm, is primed and ready to go, is done all the contracting it needs to do. So for someone who can enter a split pretty easily, but they're unable to hold it, meaning if they're down here, they're not able to hold it with just their legs. They have to rely on the floor because they don't have the control to actually stay on the legs, and they don't have the strength in the legs to hold the position. Now, because I'm not the warmest right now, if I work on my hamstrings and my hip flexors a little bit, like I did in my last live, I'll get down to the floor pretty easily. But that's the reason why also, if you practice over splits, for instance, right? So if you do the over split, let me get this thing over here. My hamstrings are pretty strong. So I'm able to hang out here safely. Because again, my hamstrings are conditioned to be stable in this position, that I'm just not collapsing. So I guess I'm too strong. My hamstrings are too strong. But someone who doesn't have the control will have a hard time lifting their arms overhead in an oversplit. Because again, they haven't taught their hamstrings to not just lengthen, or rather not just enter this range of motion, but now have the intelligence to control or express control in that range of motion. And you kind of need that, especially when you're doing aerial, or you want to do splits in your handstands or on an aerial apparatus. Is not just flopping into it. You actually need to recognize, or your hamstrings need to recognize, that they don't have the floor anymore, and they have to enter that range of motion on their own. It's like this example, right? For you to actually enter that position on the floor, might be a good idea for you to extend your wrists without the floor. So that's why people might seem confused when they're super bendy and they might have a split on the floor, but if they try to do a standing split or an upside down split, it's like noodles. Like they have a hard time entering and exiting that skill. Another indication that you might have a super bendy body but don't have the strength to control the bendy body, usually expressed by the fact that it's hard for you to exit these positions on your own. You need to come out of it in a strange way, or if you're on the floor, you have to come on the floor completely and roll out to your side. So there are different examples, right? But most of all, I think being too bendy is not the majority of the population. This is a niche group of people who are born this way, but now have to work extra hard in controlling this range of motion that they were blessed with. But most of us, don't have that issue. So yay. But I just wanted to reserve some time at the end of our live. It's not the end yet. We're not leaving yet. If you had specific questions about this topic, if you actually have an issue with being hyperflexible and you had a hard time trying to develop your strength in certain positions, I also forgot to show the example of the middle split. Well, not really middle split, but have you seen the middle split? People slide out and slide back in with just their legs. Yeah. But with straddle, being able to pancake but come back up. If you could pancake but you can't lift back up, an indication that you might be super bendy, but we got to work on that strength and control. Whoa. Let me take these glasses off. Ah. And if you just joined and would like to watch from the beginning, this live will be on the main feed as a reel. You won't be able to ask questions in real time as you have the opportunity to do so now, but at least you can see the live from the beginning, especially if you need context. If you just joined and you're like, why is she just looking at the screen? It's because we're at the end of the live and I'm just waiting for questions to pop up if there are any. And again, building stronger, flexible bodies, but specifically the bendy bodies that are just bendy by nature. We got around 3 minutes left, family. Anybody? Do we have anything else to ask? Also, one way you can start introducing strength into also improving your range of motion is to work in a larger range of motion in your strength training, 100%. So you might find that you have to decrease the intensity, aka the weight, in order to meet the depth or range of motion that you would like to work on and improve. So if you want to get sneaks to cheeks in your squat, meaning getting your hips as low as possible, but you're at a weight that doesn't, I wish I was Naruto. No. Do I wish I was Naruto or Gaara? That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I know, off tangent, when Crocs and Naruto did that collab, the only Crocs I did not purchase were the Naruto ones. But I have all the others. Anyway, if you are strength training and you're at a weight that doesn't allow you to get as low, you might have to decrease the weight in order to start training your tissues to express force from that range of motion. And it's a great way to start in just beginning to introduce these more mobility specific goals to your programming is to start with the weight you already have. We've been doing these lives for the last few years, except I did them on Sunday. I just moved it to Saturday. So we're here every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you follow the account, we do have reminders. And the last one, that was my fault. We didn't have a reminder because I didn't send the team a video. But we should have reminders now going forward if I don't forget to do them. So we're here every Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. And if you can't make the actual live, make sure you follow Stretch It so that you can see the live after I upload it. Cool? Thanks, everyone. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate you carving out the time to join. And until next time, we'll see you back here, 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Until then, take care.